Welcome to Mysteries of Superstition Mountain. I'm Larry Hedrick, where we bring the past into the present for our future viewers. Today we have another great story by Hank Sheffer.
Well, you know, folks are coming to Arizona all the time, and they're coming over here for some reason or another. It's hard to say. It may be looking for the elusive lost Dutchman gold mine, Lord knows, or any of the other unfound treasures. And there are lots of things to consider. We Arizonans have a host of stuff that is really fascinating, like ghost tales and urban legends to pick from. They range from legendary creatures like the El Chupacabra, the goat eater. How special is that? And Mogollon Monster, which happens to be our own private version of Bigfoot. And the infamous hanging tree up to the Vulture Mine. Not to mention the many murder mysteries every small town seems to have in abundance. If you happen to be traveling around down in this area, the closer you get to the Superstition Mountains, the more you might want to step back into the 1870s at the Goldfield Ghost Town and see just how it got its name. Whatever you're looking for, there's an old adage that says, if you want to find gold, you go to where they found gold. Seems to me that same scenario ought to hold true for finding ghosties and other weird stuff, don't you think? I mean, if you found them in one place, that's a good place to go looking for them again. On the other hand, sometimes tales of intrigue pop up in the most unlikely of places. Such is the case with this story I like to call Rocky and the $400 horse. The fun part is that while you're in Apache Junction, you can stop in and check it out for yourself. However, there are no guarantees on the ghosties making an appearance just because you're there. I mean, they just don't do command performances, you know. Now, our story takes place on December 29th of 1947 at the King's Guest Ranch near Dinosaur Mountain. This is the area that we now call Gold Canyon. Let me interject here that Apache Junction itself wasn't incorporated until 1978. So it's been called Youngsburg Junction, it's been called just the Junction, and at times referred to as Apache Junction, the name game. What can I tell you? That's just another whole story unto itself. Anyway, it was during the summer of 1947 when a friend of the King's, who happened to be the county probation officer, asked Julian King if he would give this fella by the name of Angel Rocky Cerna a job. He told Julian that Cerna had actually been an ex-con. He'd been in trouble, he was an ex-convict, but he needed another chance to go straight. And Julian, being the wonderful guy that he was a pretty nice guy. He agreed to give the man a job and give him a chance. Well, Rocky worked all summer without any problems. And when the weather cooled off, just like everybody else, he'd go to town and he'd go in there on the weekends and have a good time just like everybody else. Something folks were starting to learn was that he had a sincere love for racehorses, and he had aspirations of becoming a jockey and own a racehorse of his own. Unfortunately, bad stuff for Rocky always seemed to get in the way, and he wound up in jail or in trouble with the law some way or another. Now, early in September, Rocky found the racehorse he wanted to buy. He'd been looking the whole time, but he finally found one. The only problem was that the horse cost $400. Rocky didn't have that kind of money, and he really didn't have any way of obtaining it. He just wasn't making that much money. That $400 might just as well have been a boxcar load of cash. It wasn't any closer the more he worked. Julian King tried to explain to Rocky that $400 was a lot of money. There's no doubt about that. Rocky insisted he would work or he'd find some way to get the money for that horse, somehow or another. He quit working at the King's Ranch in October, which made no sense to anybody, and he took a job in town. I guess he figured he'd make more money there. that was almost 10 miles away from the King's Guest Ranch. Cerna spent most of that fateful morning on December 29, 1947, at the Apache Junction Inn. That was a pretty popular place. And his first trip down to the Superstition Mountain Shell Station was to try and borrow the $400 from the owner there, a Mrs. Catherine M. Goen. That way he could buy a racehorse down in Chandler, he'd tell her. Johnny Baker, the cook at the Apache Junction Inn, drove Rocky down to the service station, but Mrs. Goen wasn't there at the time. So he left and went back down to the inn. When he returned, the owner still wasn't there, so he left again, but apparently that bad stuff we talked about earlier popped up its ugly head again. He decided to rob the Superstition Mountain Shell Station. That was a quick way to get the money for that horse. Rocky stole a pistol from a local man named Grady Haskins, of all people, and walked back down to the station. He walked in and demanded. He wanted all the money with a gun in his hand. Catherine Goen, the owner, Ferry Thompson, Catherine's 32-year-old daughter, and two of her young daughters were all there that morning. Ferry knew Rocky and thought he was joking around. But when she said, "You're kidding, Rocky," and laughed, he shot her in the chest. Instantly, the two young daughters ran out the back door toward Jack Anderson's Apache Junction Inn to summon help. Bonnie Thompson, the older of the two Thompson girls, stopped a motorist and tried to get help for her mother. This scene had gone completely bizarre, and Rocky has apparently completely lost it altogether. He shot Miss Goen in the hand and then dragged her into the bedroom and raped her. He then shot her in the head for her trouble. He stole her car and headed east on Highway 60. For some reason, now he turned into Kings Ranch Road and got stuck in a wash of all things. Well, now Rocky walked over to the Kings Ranch, where he approached a fellow by the name of Paul Marchand, and he asked him for a ride to Safford, just right around the corner over to Safford. Yeah, right. He further told Marchand he had just killed two women. That's pretty special. Marchand refused to help, and Cerna just wandered away on foot. Well, as soon as Rocky was out of range, so to speak, Marchand immediately drove to the Sand Tanks station and reported the incident to the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. Cerna was captured several hours later by Earl Parrish, a Chandler constable, and Coy Beasley, a highway patrolman. When he was arrested, Cerna only had $50 in his possession. He was booked into the county jail at Florence. Now, if there was an upside to this horrendous episode, it was that Ferry Thompson, the mother of the two girls, survived her chest wound. But her mother, the owner of the Shell Station, Catherine, did not fare so well. She did not survive. When Rocky's background came out, we learned he was born in a small town near Douglas, Arizona, called Franklin, and had been in trouble with the law before, no doubt. At the time, he was on parole from the Arizona State Prison for robbery when he shot Ferry Thompson and killed her mother. Rocky was tried and found guilty of murder in the first degree, and the punishment was set to be death. The Pinal County Superior Court set the execution date for Cerna on May 22 of 1948. Now, Rocky seemed to have more luck than any bad guy ought to ever be allowed to have. The Arizona State Supreme Court then gave Cerna a temporary stay of execution, but then ordered him to be executed on January 21st of 1950. Governor Danny Garvey then granted Cerna a reprieve of execution on December 10th of 1949, and yet another one on April 13th of 1950. Well, Rocky B. Cerna's luck finally ran out at 4:05 on July 29th, 1950. He became the first man to be executed in Arizona's brand spanking new gas chamber. What do you bet? They were holding off. They were holding off his execution until they got their gas chamber built. No. Well, by now y'all probably wondering where that Shell station was, or is, located. Dirtwater Springs restaurant now occupies that old Superstition Mountain Shell station. It's the same building. It's just kind of spruced up a little, and the inside of Dirtwater is something to see. It's an amazing place. And the food's great. Waitresses and the staff say they can occasionally hear the ringing of the old bell that rang as customers drove up for service out where you'd get your gas. Some even say they have seen the ghost of Catherine wandering about the restaurant after closing time. What I would say to you is come on in, have something to eat and see for yourself if this restaurant at Patsy Junction really is one of the most haunted places in Arizona. That's just one more of them mysteries from Superstition Mountain.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.